In the Jewish culture, it was believed that if someone was born disabled, it was as a result of either their own sin or the sin of their parents. So when our Lord Jesus Christ had an encounter with a man who was born blind, his disciples went to him and asked who was responsible or whose sin was responsible for his blindness. And let's go to John chapter 9 and read from verse 1 to 3 to see the response that our Lord Jesus Christ gave to them. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither had this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. Now, as we have seen in that passage, the response that our Lord Jesus Christ gave to his disciples was that the man was born blind so that God's work, God's handwork might be made manifest in him. In other words, the man was born blind so that we, through the miracle Jesus Christ was going to perform on him, understand that God is the one who created all human beings. We can go further to say that God decided to create some people imperfect or make them disabled so that when they come to this world, he would manifest his act of creation, his power over them by way of miracle, as our Lord Jesus Christ did. And so that response and restoring the man's blindness afterwards proved to all the Jews beyond every reasonable doubt that it was not always because of people's sin, either the sin of the person who was born disabled or that of their parents, that that person was born disabled. Now, aside from God manifesting his power or glory in people who are born disabled, another reason that God allows people to be born with disability is in order to kill the spirit of pride and rebellion in them. You understand this better when you read Ezekiel chapter 28 and see how the angel Lucifer was created with so much beauty and brightness, and because of that beauty and brightness, he became proud and rebelled against God. And when you read Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12 to 15, you will see how that rebellion caused a war in heaven, which resulted in him, I mean the angel Lucifer, being evicted from heaven. So therefore, when people are born with disability, God will be able to keep them in check. There is nothing that will make them to become proud. There is nothing that will make them want to rebel against God, because normally and naturally, you need to understand that it is people's status or their physical well-being that always leads them into pride and rebellion. So that in itself is the second reason why God allows people to be born with disability. And lastly, aside from allowing people to be born with disability so that God can manifest his power or his work or his glory in them, and also to keep them from being proud and rebellious, God also allows people to be born with disabilities so that he can use them to achieve his purpose. You understand this better when you read Exodus chapter 4 verse 10 to 12 and discover that the man Moses who led the Israelites out of Egypt to the promised land was born as a stammerer. Now let us read that passage to discover exactly what happened. And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. And the Lord said unto him, Who had made man's mouth, or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. Now that was Moses, born as a stammerer, But that did not stop God from using him. In fact, God allowed Moses to remain that way so that he can perfect his work or use him the way that he wants to achieve his purpose on earth. Now, aside from biblical references or examples, the story of Alexander Graham Bell is another perfect example of how God can use people's disability to achieve whatever purpose he wants on earth. Now, from the story of Alexander Graham Bell, we understand that he had a child who had hardness of hearing. So, worried that the child could not hear, Alexander wanted to invent a device that will enable the child to hear. And that invention ended up with Alexander Graham Bell inventing the telephone. So then you will see God's purpose for Alexander Graham Bell was to invent the telephone, and to achieve that purpose he had to give him a child who could not hear, so that child's problem will push him, Alexander, into trying to invent a device that will cause the child to hear, and that invention will turn out to be the telephone that God himself intended. So then we understand from this message that it is not always people's sin, either that of the person who is disabled or that of their parents, that people are born with disability. Rather, God allows this thing to happen so that whatever purpose, as we have seen in this message, he wants to achieve, he will do so. Because if most of these people were born normal, if they were born with much beauty and brightness, they might end up rebelling, or they might end up becoming proud and rebelling like the angel Lucifer. So finally, if you were born disabled, you must look on the purpose that God can achieve through your disability. When you look around, you will see so many people who are disabled in life has been able to achieve a lot. You can use your disability to inspire and motivate even people who were born normal. And to those of you who are fond of mocking or looking down on people with disability, you need to understand that you are not better than them. God can use them to achieve things greater than he can even use you. Finally, as usual, please do not keep this message to yourself. Help me to share it so that others can understand why God allows some human beings to be born with disability. Remain blessed.